Hey, in the second part of our HTML, CSS, and JavaScript series, we're going to be looking at how to add styling to our page. Before we get into the coding, please remember to subscribe. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to the second part of our series. If you did the first part, great. If you're starting from here, please go to the GitHub repo in the description and get the source code. Other than that, let's get started. So we're going to start by modifying our document a little bit before we move on to the second part, which is CSS. We want to add styling to our document, to our web page, the Nelson Mandela biography page. So we are going to start by removing these text elements. So the text elements are implied, even though you do not add them. HTML already knows that the text element can be in a paragraph, it can be in a span, it can be in any element. So we don't really have to include it. I just put it there previously for demonstration purposes. So to remove all the text elements, there's a simple keyboard shortcut. You select one, then press Ctrl-D to select all the rest in the document. And then we shall delete. Similarly, we shall also do the same for this closing tag. Ctrl-D, all of them, and then delete. All right, and so we've removed the text elements. Now in here, we can decide to put this in the paragraph element. So all I would do is take this closing element and put it, closing element, Ctrl-X, put it at the end of this biography. All right, so the way the document looks right now, it's fine, but it can look cleaner, so we can format it. So we just right click, you go to the format document with. In this case, I want to first configure my default formatter. I'll just click here and set HTML language features, excuse me. So that's going to be my default formatter for this document. And then after that, I can just right click and click on format document. And so here it puts everything in a better way, cleaner way, just for which makes it easy for the eyes when we are coding. But honestly, the web does not care. Provided you have your opening and closing tags, it can be as disorganized as it is, it will still read it. Okay, so let's go on to further remove some other elements. Let's put our headers in, let's underline our headers. For that, we shall use the underline element, which is the U element. I'll start by underlining the biography. Okay, then okay, I can also remove this paragraph here. I don't need it here. Don't need that. Let me just underline this. Put it in a U element. It's a closing tag. Sorry. So already I've now underlined that. All right, now removing the extra spaces. Okay. All right, so now our document looks a bit better. So we've underlined the headings here. Next, let me add an article element where I'm going to put my another heading. Let me underline the heading, and I'm going to call this, let me make it an H3, references. And in these references, let's make a list, an unordered list. And we're going to have different list elements in that. And for each element, we're going to have an anchor element. So in the first anchor element, we shall get our first reference from the Nelson Mandela Foundation. And then get this, put it here, and then this will be Nelson Mandela Wikipedia. All right, so now that we have our anchor elements, we need to link them to the web pages that are going to be our references, and for that we shall use the href attribute. And for this first one, we shall go to the Nelson Mandela Foundation and copy the web address here and paste it in here as a string. We shall also add an href to the second anchor element. Then go to his Wikipedia page, copy, and then also paste it in there. All right, so now we have our anchor links, his references linked to the official pages. For example, if I decide to click here, it should open for me a biography page. But now I have to go back to my port, which I'm listening to for my HTML document. All right, so the links are working. Great. So let me make a few adjustments. Okay, it was ordered that is priced by the Turkey. I've heard that the Turkish don't like calling the country Turkey, so let's call it Turkey. The way they love calling it, Turkey government. All right. Okay, so we've added some stuff, we've underlined, and we've made it better. Now let's go to the gist of this tutorial, which is the CSS. So for that, let's go to our folder here and add a file. Let's call it styles.css. Okay. So now, I usually, when I'm having dealing with two files at the same time, I usually prefer splitting my screen. So I'll just right click and split left. Okay, so what it does is that it puts one side of one file to the right and the other side to the left. So I'll just delete here so that I remain in my CSS file right here. Okay, so now the next thing is I need to link my CSS file to my HTML document so that I can start with the styling. And for that, we use the link element, which is a self-closing element. And we're going to link our style field. We shall use the href. And for that, we shall go to our styles.css. And then we need to define the relationship between my HTML file, and the style sheet, which is going to be style sheet. The relationship is style sheet. Okay. All right. So with this, now my style sheet is linked to my document. Now we can start the styling. I'll start by, so for the styling, there are different types of styling. We're going to start with the element styling. And for that, okay, let me name it element styling. So for element styling, we use the element selector. Oh, let me call it selector. That makes more sense. We use an element selector to style a particular element. For this, I'm going to start by, let me say, deciding to style my full document, and I'm going to use this HTML element. And what we do in CSS, you write the element and then curly braces, and then the style that you want to apply. For this, I want to do a font family. So, and I'll use sans serif. Yeah, so CSS is interesting. It has autofill. Usually when you put your property, it automatically gives you the values, property values that are in that property. So if I want to change my font family, it gives me the options, the different fonts, like you saw. So when I call it sans serif, you can see it has changed the font in the document from Times New Roman to sans serif. So my whole document has been changed with the font. Okay. Next, and I want to style my image, the image of Nelson Mandela. And for that, I'll also use the element selector for image. So to change the image is an inline element. For you to change it, you need to make it a block element. And for that, we shall first change the display to block. So that makes possible for us to change its edit it, to move it anywhere on the page, on the web page. Okay, so I'll start by setting the width. So for width, I'm going to give it 450 pixels. So a pixel is the smallest unit of display on the screen. And one thing that you'll notice, then I'll give it a height. The height may be of 500 pixels. Every time you give a style here in the CSS that you had previously given in the HTML, the one in the CSS will overwrite the one in the HTML. As you can see in the HTML document, we had previously set the width to 280 and the height to 280. So here I didn't put pixels, it is inferred. But when I'm using my CSS, I have to put the PX to stand for pixels. Okay. All right, so now we can further style our image. Let's give it a border radius. So for the border radius, I'm going to give it a border radius of 2%. So 2% here, we are trying to remove the other sharp edges at the end. We're making them a little curved to make it look better. All right, so with that, okay, then let's center it to the screen. Let's give it a margin. Margin, I'm going to give 0 for top and bottom, and then auto for left and right. So what auto does is that it gives it the same distance from the left to the to the right of on the page. Okay, so we've styled our image a little more, which is good. It's now looking better. Next, let's style the body. So for the body, we want to for the body, we want to give it some padding. We also want to give it a border, and we also want to give the background color, change the background color. So we shall give it a padding. Let's give it a 5 pixels. 5 pixels, 20 pixels, 20 pixels, 20 pixels. So padding, we are creating some space between the body and the preceding element. And so when you give it a padding, you can see this space that has been created. Previously, it was right here to the margin. And these values, what they represent is for the padding, we have the top, and then the right, and then the bottom and the left. So we are moving it 5 pixels from the top of the from the top of the preceding element, then 20 pixels from the right of the preceding element, then 20 pixels from the left, from the bottom of the page, and then 20 pixels from the left of the preceding element. Okay, that's the padding. Let's also give it a background color. Background color. For that, let me give it a background of beige. Okay, all right. So now the background has changed. It's no longer white. It's now different color. And then we can then give it a border radius too. Border radius of 3%. Class selectors. So now we want to use classes to select a particular part of our document that we want to edit. So to style. Yes, styling is editing. They mean the same. All right. So let's style our paragraph, our biography paragraph. For that, I'm going to give it a class. Its class name, let me call it para bio. Or let me make it bio para, biography paragraph. Okay. So the way we select for this paragraph using our class name in CSS, we shall put full stop, then the name of the class. In this case, we shall use biopara as we've named it. And that selects for our class this paragraph that has this class name. And for that, let's give it a background color. Background color. I'm going to give it a background color of white. Yes, as you can see, it has turned white here. And then let me give it a padding of 10 pixels. Okay, so padding of 10 pixels. If I don't give 4 values of the padding like I did here, and I just give one. It applies this padding to all sides, top, bottom, left, right. As you can see, the spacing of this paragraph is the same from the top, from the left, from the bottom, from the right. So that's what it does. Next, let me give it a border radius of 3%. Excuse me, of 3%. All right, so it removes the sharp edge here, makes it a little curvy, which is good. All right, so that's how we use classes to select for a particular part of our document and edit it. Next, let's go to another type of selectors, which are the ID selectors. The ID selectors. So in this case, we need to give one part of our document an ID, and then we still use that ID to select for it and style it separately. And for that, let me give my heading an ID let me call it heading. And when I come here, the way we select for an ID is that we use a pound or hash. If you're using American English, I think they call it pound. British English hash. Yeah, so let's go with that. So let me call it heading. And then for my heading, I want to give it a color, the font color. And for this, I'm going to use the RGB notation. So RGB stands for red, green, blue. And we give it different values, 63 separated by commas, again 63, and then 24234. Yes, and that makes it blue. So I was looking for color blue, exactly. That's what it gives me. So here we are getting 63. So it's sort of a mixture, how it mixes the colors up, 63, 63, 234. So once you make 63 of red, 63 of green, and 63 to 34 of blue. So these are intensity values. Then we get blue. Yes. All right. So, and I think those are the primary colors, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so we've now selected our heading and we've given it a different coloring. Okay, so this is how we use IDs. You just come and give it an ID value here in the document, and then you select for it in the CSS file by putting a pound, and then the name of the ID. In this case, I used heading for my ID. Okay, so then the other type of selectors that we use in CSS are pseudo elements. That's the next selector that we're going to look at. Pseudo elements. And for that, let's look at this paragraph. I want to select for this paragraph using a pseudo element. And for that, I'll start by giving P as element selector for paragraph. So the paragraph that has a class of biopara. And I want to select for the first line of this paragraph. And for that, I'll use a pseudo element, first line. It's right here. And for that, I want to change the font weight. The font weight to bold. Okay. And as you can see, the first line of this paragraph has been turned to bold. So this first line here is a pseudo element that I'm attaching to a paragraph P that has a class of biopara. So P selects for the paragraph dot biopara for the class that has a class biopara, and then the pseudo element I want to select for the first line. The pseudo element points out that I want to select for the first line of this paragraph. So first line here is a pseudo element. Yes. So that's one way to also select for a particular part of the document. Okay, so we've now looked at one pseudo element. Let's look at another one. I can say that for all paragraphs, I want the first letter. I want to select for the first letter of every paragraph. And for that, I want to give it a font weight. Font weight maybe of 600. And as you can see, all the first letters of each paragraph have been given a font weight. They've been made bolder. Okay. As you can see, all these are paragraphs here. and every first letter in the paragraph that is under the paragraph element has been given a font weight of 600. Yep. So that's another way of showing, that's an example of pseudo element. Now let's move on to pseudo classes. Pseudo classes. And for that, I want to look for my, okay, let me give the pseudo class to the anchor element. Okay. So you see these anchor elements? I want to give them a pseudo class that will respond when we interact with them. And for that, I'm going to select for every anchor element, and my pseudo class is going to be hover. So hover is a special pseudo class. That means if I hover on these anchor elements, I want something to be done. And for this, let me give it, let me say background color. Once I hover over it, I want the background color to be aqua. Okay. And if I hover on each anchor element here, each hyperlink, as you can see, the background color changes to aqua. Yeah. All right. So that's it for CSS. I think this is a good introduction. I must state that this is not an exhaustive list of all the kinds of selections that we can use or different ways. CSS is a very versatile styling language, and there are very many ways you can change the style of your document and make it look in any way that you want. I think this is a good introduction to CSS, and I'll end this tutorial here. Find the link to these documents in the GitHub the GitHub repo that I'm going to link in the description of this video, and see you in the next part of this series, where we will be adding JavaScript to make our page dynamic and more interactive. Thank you. See you next time.